What do you do when your life goes completely off track? For Joey Bose, things had to go from bad to worse before he finally found his way. It's an all-American story that starts in Kentucky and takes us to Virginia, then afterwards, Maryland, and finally in Florida, starting in the ivory towers of academia, pausing in the depravity of banking life, and finally ending in the wilderness of entrepreneurship. Growing up, Joey Bose was the spitting image of a high-achieving Indian-American kid.
By the time I was in high school, I was able to take some college level math courses. And it was funny because my senior year, I was studying differential equations, and we would have to teleconference into a college class. And it was me and this one guy, and they would put us in a closet. It was like a storage closet in which we had a TV, the little teleconferencing system. And sort of left to our own devices, didn't really pay much attention. We would end up putting the camera up to about head level so they couldn't see what we're doing with our hands, and we just play Magic the Gathering.
Oh my gosh.
Was, not the best use of time. I ended up doing well because I liked the math, so I could always go back and study it and enjoy doing it. But that was pretty much my high school experience.
That's pretty funny. So you were so gifted that when they put you into the university class, you could goof off in class and still do well.
Yeah, I'm not proud of it.
No,
not proud of it, but that's what we would do. I mean, we're a couple of 17, 18-year-olds, of course, left to our own devices, isolated without supervision.
Are you still in touch with him by any chance?
No.
Do you know what he went to go do on afterwards?
So he was like I'm good at math, but he was great at math. Like he was Mensa level. And unfortunately with that came some, you could say, some mental health issues. And he was probably somewhere on the spectrum. And that actually led to complete implosion in college. And he actually ended up dropping out, and I have no idea what he does. I think he still lives with his parents. So, it's kind of an illustration that, you want to be smart, but not too smart. That can actually lead to a lot of problems.
Joey went on to win a full scholarship from the University of Virginia, where he mostly skipped out on his classes in favor of the lab. However, that didn't stop him from getting a PhD to Johns Hopkins University. Moving from Charlottesville to Baltimore, however, was a big culture shock.
My entire experience in Baltimore, living in one of these row homes, not in the nicest area of town. It used to, even a few years prior to me being there, was a pretty heavy center of prostitution and drug dealing. I remember the first time I pulled up in front of this house and stepped out of the car. I smashed a vial of crack cocaine, empty, of course. It was one of those little blue top vials of crack cocaine. That was the first time I'd ever seen that. Wow. And it was pretty much pretty strange time. Definitely culture shock coming from middle America and not having ever seen that level of poverty in the United States. I'd been to India and I'd seen second and third world countries before, but not in the United States. Within the first 6 months of living there, I saw two guys get gunned down in a drive-by shooting right at the end of my block. I lived in one of those blue light districts where they have 24-hour police surveillance. Don't recommend. I would not live somewhere like that. So yeah, it was pretty wild.
Against the backdrop of economic blight and isolation, Joey's doubts about his academic career only increased, despite continued external success. His thesis advisor didn't lend much inspiration.
This guy, real character. He's like 5'6", little Indian guy, 120 pounds, but they called him the Little Lion. because this guy was ferocious. There was one time where he kind of went after me. I was doing something, I was pipetting some fluids around, and he asked me the difference between like a solution and a precipitate. And I didn't know the exact definition, you know, hydrogen bonding this and the other. I was like, well, you know, the precipitate falls out. And he's like, wrong, I can't believe you don't know this. And then about a month later, we were at his house. And don't get me wrong, he was a very charming guy. Like, you know, he's a nice guy. I liked him. And we were at his house having, you know, sort of a lab recreation day, whatever. And he was making a drink, and I remember he poured some like mango puree into some vodka, and I looked at him as I saw the fluid separate. I was like, that's a precipitation. So it was kind of funny. Yeah, he's a funny guy. But yeah, you know, it was very much just a professional relationship.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, and so it honestly sounds like even at your PhD program, you're doing quite well, right? You only getting yelled at once by the little lion. And so
yeah.
Yeah, you're doing well. So then really what drives you to drop out? I mean, you've been on this course and you're doing very well at it for a period of time.
Yeah, honestly, I just taken it for granted that, a PhD is what you do after you're undergraduate. And I still didn't really have any sort of grand vision for my life or what I would be doing after I graduated. Excuse me. Um, and so, I spent about 3 years working, well, at the beginning doing lab rotations, trying to find a home, find a lab to work in for my thesis, and really couldn't find anything that stuck until it took about a year, and it was like, wow, like I don't really feel inspired by anyone here, and it was actually amazing how poor a lot of these they call them PIs, principal investigators, the ones that run the lab, right? They're the ones who direct the research, and it was amazing how unengaged some of them would be, how sort of rote their research would be, process driven, not terribly interesting, nor did they seem to care. 3 years in, I started talking to friends and family, and a family friend had just departed Wall Street. I believe it was Bank of America's investment banking division. He was an ex-CDO trader, which those collateralized debt obligations that were the financial instruments that ended up destroying Lehman Brothers and resulting in the great financial crisis of the 2008 period. And I should have known he was a complete maniac just based on that. But again, I was a kid. I was like 24. I didn't know anything about it. I thought finance was cool. I'd always been interested in macroeconomics as just a hobby. I read a lot about it. That was always just something I found interesting. I also thought that, in finance, there are a lot of real world applications. So, I talked to this guy and it was like, look, I'm setting up an investment bank in Boca Raton, Florida. I guess he just thought, I was smart, to be honest with you, because my extent of knowledge in investment banking came from a book that was called What is Investment Banking? And Liar's Poker and The Big Short, Michael Lewis books. That was it. And I had taken like Econ 101, and so I just saw it as an opportunity to just bail. It's like this is going from myopia to a macro level view. Because if you want to understand how the world works, you follow money.
Joey dropped out of his PhD and managed to get a master's to embark on his banker life. It was a sharp fork in the road. His mother was a molecular biologist and his father was a physician. At this point, Joey was walking away from everything he had ever known to join the world of Wall Street. Describe for me, what was it like to move from Baltimore to Boca Raton?
Yeah, that was definitely culture shock. I'd never seen a Ferrari in my life. And now all of a sudden, you have a bunch of 22-year-olds riding around Ferraris.
How
And
often would you see Ferraris?
oh, they were parked in my building, and I was not like I wasn't wealthy. So God only knows how people afford these things. South Florida is probably the most highly leveraged population, in existence. Like, this is a place where people come to lose their minds, and people who don't have money act like they're super rich. So it was very strange, coming from Baltimore, that's for sure. And the CEO was basically, he was kind of like Tony Soprano, and the way he looked. He's an Italian guy. The way he spoke, he was from Jersey, and basically thought he was the smartest person because he was the loudest. So highly dysfunctional. He liked me, and we had a pretty good relationship. When I first joined the firm, he was moving from his house in Red Bank, New Jersey, at a house next to Bon Jovi, actually. And I volunteered to drive up with him. He needed to trade a car in and pick up a new car and drive it down. And so we drove 23 hours from Boca Raton to Red Bank, New Jersey. And the guy would not stop talking the entire way. And it was just misery. One shot, didn't stop.
Joey threw himself into his work as a distraction from the disconnectedness of his life. And for a while, it worked. He earned his FINRA certifications, learned the language of Wall Street, and sourced deal after deal for his company. Eventually, the writing on the wall became clear. When did it all start falling apart?
Probably two years in. It was just so heavily mismanaged. There was a lot of turnover with the actual traders at their desks, and internal conflict between the president, who was my family friend that I worked with in investment banking, and the CEO.
Did you ever talk to this family friend about the futility of the work the two of you were doing?
Oh yeah. And he was very good about saying, oh, this, that, and the other. He knew how to talk. He's a Wall Street banker, man. He's smooth, he's slick. He knew how to talk.
Interesting.
And he could tell me whatever he wanted because I didn't know any better. I know better now.
Did his tone change once the company started falling apart?
Well, I'll tell you what, he didn't even have the balls to tell me that it was falling apart. All of a sudden, I'm just let go. And I remember I got a text from him the night before, and it was just, tomorrow's going to be rough. That was it. I responded. I'm like, was this meant for me? Nothing. So get let go the next day. That shit doesn't faze me. Like, I don't get phased. I'm like, whatever, screw you. Like, this whole thing was just such a mess. But then, later on, he called me and told me, look, I'm going to raise financing from this Chinese group. They want to actually start an investment banking arm. They're going to buy a commercial bank in the United States. Me and you, we're going to head it and start founding it. I'm going to be able to pay you X amount per month. And that lasted for like a couple months. And then all of a sudden the paychecks just stopped coming. He didn't even have the balls to tell me that it had fizzled out. So I ended up actually moving in with one of my best friends, who at the time was a retired JetBlue pilot, who was going through a real messy divorce, and so he was in bad shape, pretty much a full-blown alcoholic at the time, and we became good friends, and he was very important to me, lending some life experience, being about 20 years older than me. I was, fortunate to be in a place where I could kind of give him some grounding back to the real world, because his world basically fell apart with the divorce. It was messy. Lies were told, which pushed people out of his life. And yeah, just super, super messy. And, I actually ended up living with him for a period of about 8 months, where I was, again, just completely lost. Like, what now? Like, okay, I had my master's, thankfully. I had some experience as a completely failed investment banker. Not going to tell anybody that at the time. And now just completely lost. No idea what to do.
So what were the conversations between you, the lost young 20-something, and the divorced JetBlue pilot go like? Like, what types of talks would you guys have?
He was from North Carolina. I was moving from Baltimore. And so, just sort of telling the stories of, how we ended up here. And we both realized, like, we're running. And that's why a lot of people move down to South Florida, running from something, right?
Well, that's really powerful. Tell me about that. When did you realize you were running?
I don't think there was a clear-cut moment. I think probably a few years into being here, I was like, reflecting, like, man, I never thought I'd live in South Florida. I thought this was just a place people come to party.
So was this relationship the first time you felt you could be vulnerable in a friendship?
Yeah, I think so.
Tell me about that. How did that happen?
When your mind is sort of pushed to the brink, emotionally, when you're really pushed to the edge, and it's like, man, I can be honest, or I can just keep spiraling. I can just spiral into greater uncertainties, doubt, disconnection, feeling marginalized and disillusioned. I can just keep floating away, just completely untethered, or I can just start being honest and see what happens. And my experience from that is that the right people will come into your life at the right time. If you're real sincere, open, and honest, and yeah, that's been my experience.
During his time as a banker, Joey had met the original presidents of Cytonics and made a good impression. As he looked for his next opportunity, he found a founder and enterprise that had been stagnant for years and was looking to take a bet on some young blood.
So I actually had met the former president of Cytonics while working at the investment bank. At that time, 2016, 17, Cytonics was, looking to raise money. And so when I was putting feelers out for my next position, I contacted him and he said, you know what, you need to meet the CEO of Cytonics. By all appearances, they appear to be a medical device and diagnostic company. They're actually working on a recombinant protein, which is what we're working on right now, which is protein engineering, which is what my background was in. And so I had one meeting with the founder, Guy Scuderi, and we had a conversation, and he was pretty to the point. very animated character, and was basically like, why do you think you can do this job? Told him, basically my background's perfect for this. If you're willing to take a big chance on me, I'll take a big chance on you.
Working for Cytonics was a trial by fire for Joey. It was his first time operating a business, first time working in a corporate structure, and first time working with such a strong personality. Describing Guy, the founder of Cytonics.
He's my kind of maniac.
And when did you know? When did you why
Immediately, just from talking to him, definitely a type A personality.
Would you say that you and Guy are close?
Yeah. Amidst all the, back and forth, and yeah. I mean, we're close. We text.
And what do you think it is that makes the relationship work? What's the chemistry?
Mutual respect. At the very beginning, of course, I was 27. He had no faith in me and no respect. And he shouldn't. As a child.
Desperate to earn Guy's respect, Joey proposed a radical idea. He was going to raise millions of dollars from investors on the internet. Selling his team on the idea was an uphill battle.
Yeah, I've been there probably about 6-7 months. It was in his medical office where we headquartered the company, and I was in front of a couple of people. I don't even remember who they were outside of the company, but basically we're discussing our ongoing fundraising efforts. This was the first time where I'd done an equity crowdfund, and he basically expressed supreme doubt. It's like, you're not going to raise a dime. I'll bet you $1,000. I was like, we'll make it 10. I mean, that's just crazy, right? Just in front of other people, but that's his personality. I was like, all right, man, that's fine.
When you raised money successfully through, and how much did you raise the first time through equity crowdfunding?
First time we raised about $500K in about 45 days, and I was like, oh, this works. What do you know? This works. Then went out, raised 5 million, and on track for another 5.
And so when you raised this money, did Guy have any reaction?
He didn't show it. I put together a full report with all the metrics. I wrote a very nice report for the board, so they would see exactly how competent I am in doing things without anybody else's instruction. Yeah, he was a little surprised.
Do you think that was the moment you really earned his respect?
That if there was a single moment, it was probably that.
Did you guys celebrate after the first successful equity crowdfunding campaign?
I think my girlfriend made me a carrot cake. $5 million, I'll take a carrot cake. That's all I need.
What was that like? What was that like the moment you told your girlfriend, hey, babe, we successfully raised this money. I just disproved my former boss and founder of my company.
Oh, I showed her a bank. I was like, you ever seen a bank account with like this much money in it? And she was like, no. And I was like, all right, that's it. And then she made me a cake, and that was it.
Cytonics is on track to raise over $5 million in their final round of fundraising before embarking on clinical trials. The round is set to close in mid-October and is still open for investment at the time of this airing. Joey's journey, however, was as much an outer one as an inner one. Opening up to his friend for the first time at rock bottom was what led directly to the strong professional relationships he now enjoys. Reflecting on the inner journey. Do you think that it's a coincidence that you are now dating your girlfriend now? Do you think you could have been dating her years ago before you went through this transformation?
Probably not, because she's pretty put together. She's pretty mature. She's what, like 29? So no, I don't think so. She probably would have thought I was a kid.
It's very powerful.
And I was a little out there too. I was a little out there.
If you were to go back in time and you could say anything to either academic you or banker you, what do you think would be the most important things to communicate to that version of you?
Just hang in there. Just keep doing what you're doing and be diligent. You're going to make mistakes, but don't allow those mistakes to be rooted in a lack of diligence. Keep your head down. Just keep working. Produce good work. Results will come. There would be no way to be able to convince my former self to, hey, don't be so uncertain. Don't be so anxious. There's nothing you can say. But if you can, convince somebody to just keep their head down, produce, and develop a sense of confidence from the ability that you are able to produce, even when it's not paying off and there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty about everything you're doing, to still remain diligent and still produce, things will come full circle.
Although Joey was talented from an early age, it wasn't until he broke down and opened up that everything changed. Oftentimes, when we are navigating new territory, we need the help of others to find our bearings. Making drugs and dropping out may have been markers on Joey's map, but ultimately, it was the people who led him through.